Hello. If you have headphones, I recommend you put them in. I do apologize for any inconvenience. Sound issues are a consistent problem on my channel. I don't want to go through this again because I've had to raise this in several videos. But anyone who's been subscribed for a while will know this by now, so that's that. So yeah, please put in headphones if you have them so you can hear a little bit clearer. I want this to be a thinking video, something that gives people a little bit of scope to dwell on, to think about the issues that I'm raising. Um, of course, I want that from all my videos, but this one in particular, it's something that's occurred to me that I feel is worth discussing, and that is on certain abstract values that we have as human beings that are often made in my opinion, in the context of rather sweeping statements. Um, Issues like tolerance and peace and love and this sort of thing. Um, I think in themselves they are good things, but there's a certain utopianism that I'm skeptical of. And it's not that I want to be skeptical, but for me, it's important to focus on reality because idealism can be a wonderful thing. It can be inspiring. It can motivate us, and it can change things when it is pushed through a social movement or when it is believed in so much that people make that change happen. So I'm not bashing ideology as an idea in terms of bringing about change, but I'm going to say something, and this is something I put in my Facebook stats, and I got a number of likes for it, and it is this: in this world, in this world, if you go through life and you never ever offend anybody with your opinions, then I regard that as one of two things. Either you're being too cautious and you're trying to please everyone, or you're simply not being honest. Now, don't get me wrong. I would never start a fight with someone who's done nothing to me. I would never put people on a pedestal saying, "Oh, you need to wear your heart on your sleeve." Um, I accept that there are people who don't have the same confidence as other people, and they don't like confrontation. I mean, I myself don't always like confrontation. I prefer to walk away from it sometimes. I think that's totally understandable because you get people who really just enjoy arguing. They enjoy debating all the time. I have strong views, but there are times when I just can't be bothered with it. I want to just get on with my day. So I would never ever put pressure on somebody else to get into a situation that they felt uncomfortable in terms of debate. I would never, for example, put someone in the spot and say, "Oh, justify why you believe this," you know? Um, so from that point of view, I'm very tolerant in terms of what people want to do. However, if people make statements like that are sweeping in nature, then I think they need to be prepared to perhaps deal with a bit of cynicism. I mean, if someone makes a statement like, "Oh, why can't we all just get on?" Yeah, it's a lovely idea, but to me, it's just like, well, 7 billion people. Do you really think that that's ever going to happen? Um, and the thing is, if you if you take a reality stance on these issues, then you're seen as a cynic. You're seen as a pessimist, or you're even seen as an unpleasant individual. I don't think it is that. I think it's just a case of being mature enough to recognize the reality of a situation. And there are certain abstract terms that get thrown around a lot as being values, which actually, in certain contexts, are not that virtuous. Take, for example, tolerance. In of itself, it sounds like a wonderful thing. We're all coming together, unified in love and tolerance. Wonderful. But what if, I mean, should we tolerate, for example, bullying? Should we tolerate crime? Should we tolerate discrimination? So there's an inherent contradiction in portraying this word as a benevolent thing when you can hold it up with many flaws in certain contexts. There's times that tolerance is not a good thing. Is it a good thing if a government tolerates corruption? No. Is it a good thing if victims of crime are expected to tolerate the crime that they're facing? Of course not. So, tolerance, in my opinion, is abstract. It depends on what way you're looking at it. Now, if we're talking about tolerance in the context of, say, lessons from Auschwitz, hell yes, it's a good thing because it was hatred and bigotry that led to genocides such as that, or the Rwandan genocide, or many other examples, some of the gravest crimes in human history. So I understand that most of the time when people are talking about tolerance, they have good intentions, but I don't like to use the term very much myself because I think it's a bit abstract. And there's other issues. Love, well, love again, in itself is not a bad thing. But what if, I think it was the Black Eyed Peas, they actually had a lyric in one of their songs, pieces of love that don't belong. I'm not sure directly, but I think that may have been a reference, for example, to sexual predators and pedophiles. Now, a pedophile may believe that they love their victim, but to the rest of us, it's nothing of the sort. It's exploitation, it's destroying someone's life, it's and yet they would argue that to them it is love. But to the rest of it, it's a heinous crime that is robbing a child of their childhood. So that's why I really take issue with these sort of abstract notions. It's particularly commonplace among religion. I mean, you see things like, I'm a tolerant person, I respect all religions. Now, if you probe a little bit deeper, is that really as virtuous as it sounds? If you respect all religions, by extension, you respect some of the things that are done in the name of religion. So, by extension, you're respecting the severe human rights abuses that are done under Islamic theocracies. You respect some of the hardline teachings of Christian fundamentalists. I mean, these things are abstract. And I think what the reason why I take issue with this is that very often the people who are promoting these ideas of love and respect and tolerance are the very first to preach to those that they believe to not be standing up to their moral level. And there is a huge amount of self satisfaction from this sort of mindset. I'm not talking about people who are genuinely doing it from a point of good intentions and they're drained of all the suffering in the world and they say, I would never judge that. I get tired of hearing about war and human rights abuses and all these negative things. You would be a pretty cold bastard if you didn't. But if you're going to make sweeping statements about love and tolerance and respect, you have to understand that there is a caveat to that, and that is reality. So saying something like, I respect all religions, well, okay, but to me, that's not a great benevolent statement. To me, that's either willfully ignorant or just a bit naive. And I have to say, very often it's a regressive left that come out with things like this. Now, the reason I'm so cynical and so critical of their attitude is because it's simply not consistent. It's just not. They will be the first to really, really lambast and pontificate and preach about racism if it's coming from white supremacists. And that would be fine in and of itself. Hell, I would join them. But what they will not do is hold the same standards with, for example, Islamic fundamentalism. They just will not do that. Yes, they might sort of passively say, well, yeah, I don't agree with that. I criticize it. But there simply is not the same level of outrage coming from that school of thought. And I just have no respect for that inconsistency. It's not that they are criticizing right wing opinions, because the left wing side of me might actually be in agreement with some of the things they're saying. It's the lack of consistency I have a problem with. That's something I find, frankly, a bit insufferable. Um, but there's another thing. This comes into personality cults as well. Certain people in history are held up to be almost godlike figures. Now, I am wary of all personality cults, all of them. And this is why. There are human beings, there are people who are very inspiring. And there's no question about that. They're inspiring either as political leaders or as cultural figures for one reason or another. But I'm going to name a few people, and I guarantee you, every single person I'm going to name has serious flaws. If you look a bit deeper into the biography, so Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, Aung San Suu Kyi, Muhammad Ali, they're five examples of people who are genuinely revered as great, wonderful human beings. Yet all five, I could point to certain personality flaws. And this is not a case of, trying to attack these people because there is reasons to genuinely admire them. But I have always been uncomfortable with personality cults, and I feel sometimes when people are revered to such an extent that any critique is automatically met with fierce, fierce rebuttal. Like, how dare you say that about this person? You know, if anything, it's more insulting to put them in a Marvel-esque platform and pretend that they are somehow beyond critique, because that actually dehumanizes them. And those are just five examples. There are others. I use those examples, by the way, deliberately because I could have held up dictators, but that would be the nature of dictatorship, because personality cults come from the point of a barrel. With the five people I've named, it's not genuinely from violence insofar as they are not dictators. In fact, most of the five I named there were, democratic figures. But the point is they're revered in such a point that anyone who expresses a different point of view is immediately shouted down. I really have a problem with that because it means that there cannot be any sort of intellectual discussion at all over their biography, and that to me is a problem. It dehumanizes them. Put it this way, if I was ever in a position where I was held up and admired by millions of people, yes, it would be nice, but I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable if people then felt that I could never be criticized. Because I would feel like I was being put on a pedestal of, you know, being beyond reproach. And I think that it actually causes more problems rather than inspiring people. But, there's a lot of things to consider with this. The world is a very complex place, and values are a good thing. There are basic truisms that can be found almost in every culture. In virtually every culture, for example, murder is seen as wrong, right? I don't think that's controversial. I think in most cultures, murder is seen as wrong. Um, in most cultures, stealing is seen as wrong. In most cultures, corruption is seen as a bad thing. It might be endemic in some parts of the world, but it's still seen as a negative thing. So there are certain human issues that are universal, but there's other things that unfortunately are not. So I wish there was a universal standard on human rights. There isn't. And I would be naive to think that there would be. I don't agree with those who say, oh, it's just the West trying to impose their standards. I don't agree with that because I think that there are many people in Eastern countries who are passionate human rights activists and they're not Western stooges. I don't accept that. But all I would say is that there's nothing wrong with promoting ideas of tolerance and respect and unity and so on. Those are wonderful things, they are. But you also have to be wary not to be naive in this world. That's all I would say. So I have no respect for someone who preaches about tolerance. And then when someone criticizes the extreme tenets of Islamic theocracies, that person then turns around and says, oh, you're a bigot, you hate Muslims. There's nothing tolerant or open minded about that. That's willful ignorance, and it's actually intolerant. It's trying to silence any sort of debate. And that's what I find so disturbing about the regressive left, and so insufferable, that they are so self-righteous in what they pontificate, and they end up looking like hypocrites. And it isn't just a regressive left. I would argue there's a regressive right as well. I mean, you can find it, for example, evangelical Christians are complete hypocrites because they would say that Jesus is all about love and respect, and yet they're the most judgmental people around, and they can be incredibly controlling in terms of what other people think and do. So yeah, I'm not just saying it's the left. I do see it on the right as well. But as a general code, we all have to sort of look in on ourselves and think, well, I'm no saint, you know. So if you're wearing your heart on your sleeves, if you're saying this is wrong, that is wrong, you have to think, well, what do I propose as an alternative? And try to not give the impression that you are pontificating, because people do not like that. People do not like preaching in that sense. Okay, I'll leave it there. I apologize for the sound issues and thank you for listening. Let me know your thoughts. Cheers.